you show that not only are you capable of thinking of these more existential questions and coming to conclusions on things that are on the metaphysical side and all that, um, but you are able to say, "Hey, this is all above me, right? I'm just another person. I can't do the things that God and all that have done." So I think that it's important to note that when you have people that are more faithful, there are a lot of other qualities that come with that. And one thing that I tend to see, obviously, this isn't a hard line rule, there's outliers on both sides, but there's a very humble aspect of things too. And then that starts translating into the gun side, right? When you're trying to get more proficient with your firearms and your skill set and all that stuff, guys that are more grounded in the faith are able to take a more humble stance toward things because they've established that the foundation of their life is not, um, you know, they're not. It's not a self-driven thing, right? They're the product of a creation from a greater creator. So already from the beginning of your life, you are not necessarily in control. You are to a degree, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I have to apologize. What is the problem? It's user error. I didn't start the recording until about a minute and 30 seconds ago, but that's
Yeah, I
actually
saw that.
it's it's going to be a great, it's going to be a great introduction, and I think that's a better place to start than where we were, or like how I was rambling on beginning. So, Tyler, I want to ask you one more time to introduce yourself onto the Redacted Culture Cast, because if people want to laugh at it, it's like that's how it works. Like, I apologize. I should have clicked the right button twice, I guess.
Yeah, I saw that recording bar pop up, and I was just gonna keep going with my thing because I didn't know if that was something internal or not. But
Well, you nailed my introduction, so I get to say congratulations. You did a great job there. So, would you introduce yourself one more time, and then I'll roll into my bit?
yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm from the Longhouse Podcast, Longhouse Preparedness. I'm the main guy behind it. I have a co-host that I do a lot of the episodes with, Gio, who isn't here with us. But yeah, as far as my background goes, I've been in the Marine Corps for almost a decade now. I just hit my 9 years. I'm a comm guy by trade. I'm a radio operator, and now I'm shifting over into the fire side. So indirect fire, close air support, all that stuff. So that's kind of where I'm transitioning out of the soul comm sort of side and into the fire side. But other than that, I'm a reservist, so I have a normal civilian job. I have a family. We actually just had another kid over the weekend, so that's fun. And yeah, I'm pretty openly Catholic on the internet and online, and I like to talk about faith a lot and whatnot. So
Well, Tyler, I'm honored to have you here. And if this is going to be the 3-minute mark for the introduction into the Redacted Culture Cast, you are coming on to a show that when we started off, or when this idea was began, the thing that I was seeing in gun culture was a generational shift between some of the more anti-intellectual, pseudo practical mentalities of the past into something that was much more thorough in the way that it thought about things like the Second Amendment, or the right to bear arms, or personal safety, or in our case, the the fact that privacy itself is something that must be defended as well as property. And we live in an environment where if you have property but no privacy, that the where at any given moment you can be spied upon and have your life left open before whoever wants to use malicious attacks against you. You don't really have a free country. You don't really we aren't really living up to our values. And so what where we were going with this, and I think we can recap on it really quickly, is something that I found. How I encountered you is through X, formerly known as Twitter. You had put out a post that was talking about moral foundations.
mhm.
And the moral foundations aspect of it being, if I recall, the idea that was ingrained into this long form post was, if you can have kit and not be in shape, and we know that that's not a big brain idea. That's a pretty, it's a pretty moderate to introductory level.
That's a day two idea.
It's like, okay, you've got your feet underneath you, but now we got to add one more thing to the fire, or one more tool the toolbox. And then as you continue to engage in both skill development and physical capability, then there's also mental strength or mental fortitude. And that only goes so far, because at some point in time you must look at the spiritual, and that would be moral foundations. And so we live in a dramatic world that has both physical consequences, mental consequences, and spiritual consequences
Mm-hmm.
for those of us who engage in our moral foundation. And that's where you were going with it. But then, of course, before I hit the record button, you gave a great explanation of those three things. Could you go over that one more time?
Yeah. So take two is that I think that there's essentially three pillars that every man should have, and that's the physical strength, the mental strength, and then the spiritual strength. And your physical is ultimately driven by your mental strength. So if you are not in a good mental space, generally you're not going to want to go out and work out and make sure that your physical abilities are at what you can, at your peak. Um, and then I think that what drives a lot of the mental strength is your spiritual strength, and having that grounding in your spirituality is going to help, ease your mental um, pillar, so to speak, so that way you can strengthen it, and then that can translate into you know working towards your physical side. So I explained it a lot better the first time, but
I don't know. That was pretty good.
paraphrasing.
I mean, it's good though, because I'll go back into my story, or the anecdote of my life is, at least in two different points, I've recognized that as I have, let's just say, not paid attention to my faith or my spirit, like my relationship with God, or read it through, whether that's through prayer or reading the Bible. It didn't happen immediately, but over time, that negligence of attending to spiritual health led to a breakdown of mental health. And it wasn't exactly in the form of panic attacks, but it was this oscillation between anxious activity and periods of nothing.
Hmm.
And so that those anxious that anxious activity might look like sometimes keeping myself in physical condition, but it also might be like keeping my house in order. And so if you look at that as like a series of plates stacked on top of each other, not, I pick it up, I put it down plates, but the layers of your life, the physical foundation is grounded in a mental state, and that mental state isn't grounded in itself. It doesn't end at cognito ergo sum. It's below that, one layer deeper, which is, you have to be grounded in your identity and who you are and where you exist in the world. And that is a worldview, and that is where religion and faith and spiritualism come into effect.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too that when we start looking at the gun culture now, because you and I had talked briefly about how there's a huge shift in things. Um, I think that we can kind of sum things up by saying that the initial, like, I would say that this gun culture that we have now probably started somewhere in like the early to mid 2000s, like right around YouTube, so like 2006 ish. And obviously people had guns before then, and there was still hunters and sportsmen and all that stuff. But I don't think that it really started to get as big as it did, and get, kind of shape itself in the way that it did until YouTube was there to start putting out a lot of the stuff. Like I remember being young before I could even own a gun, and me and my dad were watching like Nut and Fancy videos in 2008 on YouTube and whatnot. And he was obviously one of the big like initial YouTubers. Um, but I think that he was kind of one of the guys that really pushed from the beginning, like, hey, like go out and run these courses and have kit on and all that. And I think that that's pretty commonplace now, but even 10 years ago, if you went to the range and you had kid on and all that stuff, people would look at you like you were uh you know preparing for the next Sandy Hook or something crazy like that. Like you didn't get it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more side-eyed looks back in the day,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's
like,
pretty
and
common now. Now, you only get a side-eyed look if your kit's all jacked up, not the fact that you have it on. So, but yeah, I think that as we progress through the gun culture, it starts with just, okay, you should have a like an AR-15, all right, right? They're not the most practical for hunting, but that's not what they're made for. That's not what the 2A is for. And then it starts to progress and progress until now, um, you know, it's not uncommon to throw a rock in these circles of gun guys and get guys that have fully equipped rifles, night vision, body armor, ballistic helmets, all that stuff, and have never been to the military a day in their life because they understand the importance of it, um, from a civilian standpoint. And I think that now there's been a large push in the past few years in terms of like self-sufficiency. And then I think that that's where a lot of guys are starting to realize that you can't be totally self-sufficient. And I'm not sure where the recording started, but that was kind of the the thing that I was going on before, is that taking a look at the real existential questions and the existence of ourselves and our nature and kind of the root cause of everything, you start to have a lot of these questions that can't be answered by, you know, ordinary means. You have to start looking into the extraordinary means, and then you start getting into the supernatural isn't really the right term for it, but like the kind of metaphysical stuff, and that's when you start looking at faith and all that, and trying to find the root cause to everything, because everybody has always been trying to figure out why we're here, what our purpose is, what's after us. And I think that kind of in that quest for self-sufficiency, a lot of guys find that.
Yeah. You still there? Did I
Yep.
lose you? Okay,
No,
yeah, no, they
no,
certainly do.
I kind of ended it on like a weird tone, but I
No, it's
didn't
I
I didn't
got it.
really have anything more to contribute to that sentence.
No, no, I'm sure we'll get to it because I've seen it happen a couple different ways, and one of them is you can go down like a progression, and I think I think that resonates with the way that you brought it up. Like, there's an introductory into gun culture, and I think at the core of it, though, and this is where a subject that I believe gets overlooked quite a bit, and that is that people aren't called, or people don't enter the gun culture because of some uh purely circumstantial explanation. It's not like, like we see things happen where people get involved and they get introduced to gun culture, whether it's through things like the 2020 riots, or a loss of dependency or trust in say government institutions, or there's a whole number of things. But at
Mhm.
the core of it, I think when you dig down into their desire, there is something that some form of a calling that they have. Like, they believe that they are called to be somebody of character and of capability, and that is something that they want to be able to carry on like a torch through their life, whether or not they receive, or whether or not they experience any sort of circumstance which call demands of them to rise to that occasion. And then from there, but that is a hard, it's a hard thing to articulate, and sometimes they have to work it out, and it takes time. So someone will get their AR-15, and then they'll kit it out, and they'll start practicing with it, and they'll have their handgun and their rifle and their belt and their plate carrier, and then they'll add stuff and capability and skill and training and physical fitness, and eventually they have to come to the question of what for. And that question is reintroduced to so many of us multiple times. It's an easier answer when you are in the military or in law enforcement, because you have a duty to uphold, as that you sign the line there.
Mhm.
But that isn't available to everybody. That straightforward duty isn't just, not everyone in gun culture has that, or is there, but they have something that calls them. And I think that the unity of that calling is absolute. That especially us as men feel called, as men, to be strong and courageous, not just concerned for our life and self-defense. Like,
Oh, yeah.
there's a virtue to being strong and courageous, and where do you ground that virtue, and where does it come from? And sometimes you feel the calling before you know where to place it.
Oh, yeah,
But
definitely.
mhm.
I think too that it's something that I've thought about before, and it's kind of a recurring thought, and especially once I started to want to form a group of guys to just shoot with, right? Just like-minded guys to go out and shoot with. And then after, there was actually in like late 2019, I don't know if you remember, but there was a whole thing where there was this guy who was like live streaming the like all these federal law enforcement like outside of his house, and he was saying that it was like a wrongful red flag thing and whatnot. And it turned out like, the accusations around like domestic violence or something, but I don't know whatever happened with that. But anyway, the guy's name was like Whiskey Warrior or something.
I
Something
remember
to
when
that.
this happened, but I don't have the details on the top of my
Yeah.
head.
So me and a buddy of mine that had just met in like an Instagram group chat of a couple of guys said, "Hey, if this was real, um, and it's totally possible that something like this could become real, neither of us have anybody to look out for us. Like, we're just individuals that like guns and have some kit and whatnot." And I had a buddy that lived nearby that we'd go out and go camping and all that stuff. And it was basically just camping with guns and kit. We'd like fill in some range time and whatnot. So we started getting together and doing some training, and that's when I kind of brought some of the experience that I had just through the basic like Marine Corps fundamental training, and like, okay, this is how you do patrolling formations and all that. And I've always had an interest in that stuff, so I've always read more into it, and I've been in an infantry battalion my whole time, so I've always been exposed to that side of things. So, like, here's some basic infantry skills, and then, we look around, and a couple more guys that are kind of in our area and whatnot are cool, and we'll bring them out. And the next thing you know, like, we've got a decent number of guys that are coming out to regular things where we're trying to just get some of these infantry skills like ingrained into us. And we're not going out with the thing of like, oh, the world's going to end any day now, like we need to get ready. It's more like, hey, here's a break from day-to-day life of guys that are similar that we can use to help reinforce each other through like those three pillars like I had mentioned before. So I always try to get guys that are like-minded, and then and all that. So it's one of those things where I think about it like, I've been born at a specific time in a specific place with the ability to speak to specific people for a reason. And I'm not trying to make it like a main character syndrome type of outlook, but it's just everybody has that. And I think that when you start to look at the spiritual side of things, um, there it's said that that God knows how many hair follicles are on your head, and if you're like me, it's not that many, so it's not as crazy as some other people, right? Like if you're some 5'4" Italian guy, you're gonna have like 6 times as many as most people, but
I mean, does that count? I mean, are we just counting on the head at this point in time? Because I've got a pretty good head of hair, but
I mean, I'm sure everywhere, but yeah, I think that
so
if the
so
saying
as
was
so as a Catholic, you're moving away from a literalist interpretation of the scriptures to a more metaphorical one.
I wouldn't go that far.
I'm being facetious.
No, I know. I get jokes like that all the time, so I'm a good sport about it. Which I'm completely open to having conversations about it too. But anyway, I think that because we had said it briefly before that the like doomer mindset doesn't really have a place here. And I had recently put out a post on the Patreon, which I said that I would never start one, and then I did because it, believe it or not, money helps to fund more things to test out for people and whatnot. But it was all about the defeatist mentality and how, you know, like all throughout history, warfare has progressed. And nowadays, like you're able to go on every single day and watch footage from the war in Ukraine where drones with thermal imaging are dropping bombs on people that have no idea and don't want to be there. And so it's really easy for those people to think like, oh, it doesn't matter anything I do. It doesn't matter how hard I train. It doesn't matter any of this because at the end of the day, I'm just going to be a little white speckle in a drone feed that's going to get a mortar round dropped on it. So I think that the lack of a good spiritual foundation and a good mental foundation and stuff is the cause of that because it doesn't take that long to realize that all throughout history, warfare has progressed, and people made the sword, and then other people said, "Hey, let's invent the shield," right? Like, there's always going to be a counter to new technology that comes out, and I have like a thermal hide sitting behind me, right? Like, that thermal hide exists for a reason, and it's to stop. It's that shield in this aspect. So I think that having that thought of like, I'm here for a specific reason in a specific place for a specific thing, and no matter what comes out, there's going to be a counter to it, and I just need to keep pushing on, is going to make a lot of guys train harder and look at the people that they're training with more seriously and say, hey, these people are not people that I can trust, or they're not people that I want to associate with, or they're not people that can lift me up in any way. Or on the flip side, these are solid guys that I need to keep a good friendship with and keep close.
When you bring it up that way, there's a very distinct similarity and disconnect between military experiences and life in general. And the similarity is the microcosm of Ranger School it functions on one has one major function as you're going through, is that Ranger School or a selection process doesn't care about the people who quit. And so as you're going through it, whether you're doing a Ranger School, whether you're going through Ranger School or whether you're going through a selection process or whatever, um, one of the things that you run into is that people quit the program. They recycle mountain phase and they say, I don't want to do this anymore, and they go home. And
Mhm.
once they do that, they're gone, right? And so in our that if you're in an environment like that, if you're in Ranger School and you're with you've got a squad, you're because you that functioned at the time I was in the course in kind of a squad team based or squad based element size. um you do your things as a squad and a platoon, and a lot of your evaluations would function on that level. If you had guys in, say, the first phase of Ranger School who you didn't think had the fortitude to stick it out, they usually got distanced. They usually were peered out, or it was not, it wasn't rocket science or like some sort of magical character observation matrix. It was like, yeah, that dude doesn't have it. He doesn't have the heart to stick it out. So I'm not going to put too much energy into building a relationship with that guy, because when it gets difficult, when we have to do a 12-mile ruck march, or we have to do something like, I don't want to hitch my wagon to his post, which is a completely different attitude, which is should not be compared to having a buddy making a friendship or building a relationship in the middle of a course, and when they're having a down day, you go out of your way to push them through it. Those are two completely different things. But and so that analogy applying to the world outside is that the doomer mentality is, for many of us, exactly that thing. Is that, like, if I'm trying to spend time with you and we're trying to, let's just say we're building a community, and a community can be, it's best when it's local and it's physical, but then there can be even, like, through social media and through communication and through a network that spans the nation, it can function. But if there's a guy that you got who's just always down about the world coming to an end and it's collapsing, like, they don't stick around very long. and
No.
and sometimes it's such that you can be the person to come down and be like, hey man, I know life is low right now, but let's go. Like, you're gonna make it. Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's, like, you're going through a hard time, whether it's a difficulty at work, whether it's an alcohol addiction, whether it's a period of aimlessness between a major achievement like getting your master's degree and not landing that job right away, or whatever. And it's like that is something that we do through community, whether it's through a church, which happens to be one of the more historically robust versions,
Oh, yeah.
or not. But then you also run into people who, no matter what you do for them, no matter how much you encourage them or you inspire them on, they just sort of like, they never get over the ego of how bad their life is. And I know we can get into like a long-winded tit for tat on how bad really is, But the, but there's a certain that there's a poison pill attached to the doomer mentality. Is if you're right, the world is falling apart. If you're
Mhm.
wrong, then your prediction was shit. And
Yeah.
it's like there's no win. It's a lose-lose scenario.
Yeah,
Where
and
where the analogy though breaks down, and where I think I'll wrap this up quickly if I can. Where the analogy breaks down is that our life and our communities are not bound to a 60-day calendar. Like we're not here. You live in a town, you live in a big city. Let's just say you live in Boston. Um, you're not, and you have no intent of moving out. You don't just switch friend groups every 60 days. And
right.
so there is a bit of consequence that is very lasting with the people you surround yourself around. And we're naturally averse to that guy who hops from group to group chasing clout and community, in that sense. But we also recognize that like the analogy of ranger school isn't universal. It's just an example that stuck out for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think too that there's like very kind of, I guess, secular ways that you can improve yourself. Like, there's a lot of things, tips that I've taken from a buddy that I haven't hung out with in years. But he was not like religious in any means. And if you brought up the idea to him, he would just immediately shoot you down and be like, no, that's all dumb, superstitious mumbo jumbo. Um, but he had told me before that because he was successful in his uh, day job, and I met him through the Marine Corps. And on his first day at our unit, he yelled at me because I was a lance corporal and he was a sergeant, and I was doing something wrong. But we ended up becoming good friends for a while, and he would always tell me that you are the average of the 5 closest people you hang out with. So if you're hanging out with a bunch of idiots, uh, you know, it's gonna bring your average down. And if you find a group of guys that are very above average and better than you, and you're the worst one in the group, it's gonna start bringing you up. But
It's not a bad place to be. We're going to get interrupted temporarily as
oh no,
somebody's
it's fine.
driving past me real quick here, but such is life. That's
You're
and
actually literally in the middle of a field.
I'm sort of on the edge of a field on a small slab of cement at the farthest location that I can be to still get the signal to make sure that this is connected properly. But I am at the home of somebody else who they have a life and they have to do things, and so I can
Yeah.
only I have to like accommodate their schedule, I guess.
Uh,
How rude of me
what
to
was me?
Yeah, I know, right? I have to invade somebody's home and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna set up here?" No, it's been good. They've been
That's funny.
very hospitable. So so the yeah, no, I think it's interesting that that comes up because you get even like the memes, and it's like your network is your net worth. And like, don't get me wrong, people have teased that into the grave, and it's hilarious. And I want to get, if you're able to, I'd like to get a little bit more granular on the subject because I've found myself on both ends of that issue where I was the low guy and my friends were pulling me up, and then I found myself like endlessly
Pulling
um
as hard as you can, and you don't know how much more pull you got in you.
yeah, like, and sometimes you pull as hard as you can and they make no movement.
Yep.
And
I
then
I've
and then
I've
2
been on
years
both ends of the spectrum too.
but then like 2 years later, you kind of run into them again later, and they're like, "Hey man, their life is just turned around." And
Yep.
it's like, "Good. I'm glad that that can happen." Um and that's just community. That's just it's like that's just I wish you could make a magic spell book on making all this stuff work, but that's just not how it goes. So,
Yeah. No, I fully agree with you. Yeah.
So doubling down on the community aspect, another change that we've talked about a little bit on the show, but probably not as specifically, is how a major difference between the old ways of gun culture and the new ways of gun culture is that the new way is much more focused on having that group of people around you, whereas the old ways were a lot more focused on self-sufficiency. And
Yep.
what I mean by even self-sufficiency is you could take it to the prepper in the bunker in the basement kind of level where it's like, and don't get me wrong, like I know that I understand that there are levels of preparedness here, and we're not trying to be a full dig on it, but like the issue that people had with the guy who was only focused on building an underground bunker and stocking it with beans and porno magazines or whatever it was, is like, he also wasn't a person that, despite there being no apocalypse, he didn't really want around because he wasn't trustworthy.
Yeah, they're always just they were just like dweebs. Like I've run into so many guys.
Dweebs.
Yeah, I've run into so many guys that are like the preppers, right? Like my boss at work is kind of one of those guys where he's like, I've got 22 12 gauge shotguns, and I have a shotgun, a pistol, and a rifle for everybody in my house. And because you're the first thing that you're gonna instantly do is tell your wife and kids to start fighting. Um, you know, I have my own takes on that, but
Yeah, the first thing that I'm gonna do is take my wife and move her to somebody's safe house, or
yeah, that's
if there's something going around in my neighborhood, I'm gonna move her elsewhere.
exactly.
You know,
But I had told him like, oh, I have night vision, and he's like, that's crazy, and he's like, I would never spend that much money, and I'm like, how many guns can you carry at the same time?
bro,
And
you have 22 you have
yeah,
22
exactly.
shotguns,
So there's like the the
which you can
I brought it
which you
up
can
kind of.
sell for like $100 a piece. Like,
Oh, at a absolute minimum, because he has I mean, he's got nice stuff,
good. Oh, good.
but
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
it's just like recently I had put out kind of a thing saying that there's I think it might have been on Instagram or something, I can't remember, but I've brought up this idea before in kind of my little circles, is that you have like the hobbyist, and then you have the prepper, and I hate that term because it just immediately makes you think of that 400-pound dude in the concrete bunker with all the beans. But you have the guys that they get into guns and they get into gear, and they wanna get their gear and they wanna go do stuff, and because it's fun and it's cool, and it is, and they wanna get out there and they wanna shoot and they just wanna have fun, but that's about the extent of it, and that's fine. You are totally entitled to stopping it there, right? Hey, I have all this gear, and worst case, if something happens to happen, I guess I'll be okay for a little bit. But for the most part, these guys just want to go on range days and have fun, and it is fun. And then you have the prepper side, prepared civilian, all that stuff, where it's guys that are training for a purpose, and I think it's really important to figure out which category you fit into, and not look at one as necessarily better or worse than the other, because they're just different, right?
It's
Um,
different sub communities for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that one of the problems is that you'll get these guys that are like the hardcore, like, I wanna go out and I wanna train, I wanna suffer, and I'm doing it to play out these potential situations that I believe are the most likely things to occur if something goes wrong. At least that's how it should be, right? Some people just aimlessly, quote unquote, train, and it's like you're not really training for anything. Um, you're just kind of getting out and walking around in the woods. But anyway, um, they'll pick up these guys that are hobbyists and that just want to go out there and have a couple beers by the fire and then wake up and go shoot a little bit and play with their gear and hone in their kit and do a couple drills and stuff. And it doesn't really lend well once you are a hobbyist in a prepared group, and you're a prepared guy in like a hobbyist group. So
Interesting. So I have a hmm, maybe it's indicative of my position of where I'm at, because I don't the hobbyist I think the hobbyist idea gets a bit of a bad rap.
I would agree. I don't think
Um
it's a bad thing to be.
no, yeah, I mean, it's not even a bad thing, but I think it gets a bit of a bad rap, and the reason why is like is that it's treated as less serious. Whereas,
Yeah.
and then what you get in the issue that I have with that is that if you were gonna partition it between like the hobbyist and the prepper, or the hobbyist and like the enthusiast, whatever you want to call the second category, is that second category has this like unstated, never-ending race to who's ever more prepared.
The
Like, and
hobbyist is definitely happier.
Yeah, I would agree. Because the hobbyist, at least in this sense, probably doesn't bring any pretense to what they're doing. Like they know, and it's like I've seen it. I've seen the joke stated in the past in gun culture where it's like, well, I could play golf or I could shoot trap. At least I know that if the grocery store closes down, I don't have to worry about trying to hit a goose out of the air with a golf ball.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and it's like, I mean, and don't get me wrong, like it's funny, like it's funny, and so it's just like, yeah, I mean, the practicality of your hobby is a good run, but even then, like I don't see the hobbyist in that sense being really somebody who's ingrained in gun culture. Like, I mean, and they may make themselves that way, or they may work themselves in that direction, or they may be motivated to given certain circumstances. But the big, difference there in the preparedness side, which I think from where we're standing and where we're talking from this position has to be to address that second group. The and it's not to dismiss the hobbyist. It's just like if that's where they're at, that's where they're at, and that's what they're doing, and that's what they want to do. And it's like they're bringing something else to the table. They're probably, but they have the same moral challenges. Like, am I providing for my family? Am I doing what is right before the Lord? Am I living a virtuous life?
Mhm.
Or because I mean, you can be an alcoholic with a gun hobby, and you can be an alcoholic with a golf hobby.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah,
you're
for
re-
sure.
and if you're highly energetic, you can probably knock out both. Um,
Yeah, you
but
must not have kids.
I don't have kids yet, so I don't
No,
also
I
play.
mean, that guy that could do both, he definitely doesn't.
I also don't play golf. Um, I don't think I've ever really played golf. So
It's funny, just today I was, because my church is doing a golf outing soon, and we just did, like, a shooting event with a bunch of the men there, and there's actually 2 local monks that came to shoot too, so that was pretty funny. But, yeah, I just got a text today asking if I was, doing this golf outing, like, fundraiser thing, and if I would be on a team or whatnot, and I'm like, "Dude, I'm the last person you want on your team because 'cause I've never golfed a day in my life."
well, there is this thing called beginner's luck, so we'll see
Yeah.
how that goes. But to re-rail the derail, it's this the thing that I think that we're looking at in the prepper side, because it's no longer preppers, is everything's moved towards homesteading. And on the skill development side, or on the one hand, you could say that sort of older prepper mentality was a lot about stuff and things. And then there were some people that would go on to like fieldcraft and developing skill sets
Mhm.
that way. Whereas the homesteading side, like our contemporary gun culture, is much more focused on skill development, and that's a good thing, especially because you see it within specifically the gun side of the homesteading movement. It's like, okay, so I may not be a world class competition shooter, but I'm comfortable with my skills. I could get better. I know where I could get better, and I know how I could get better. But there are other things that I also want to add. Like I want to learn how to pick locks, and I want to learn how to do area surveillance, or I want to do or area reconnaissance, or I want to learn how to do um like long movements for like ranging or patrolling. And those are, like, I think those are all really good things to see, because you get people like Marcus Singletary over at Cloaked Entry Co. teaching lockpicking, and um you got Mojave Repeater, who's teaching radios, and you've got Grid Base, which is looking at different ways to do off-grid communications and information gathering, whether it's in his little base camp, which holds what he calls the Library of Alexandria. It's like you have all this information available to you, and it's good to keep. It's useful to keep that at hand, because in the event that your access to information goes away because your library burns down or your internet goes out, you still have at least something.
Yeah.
And those are all good things. Fieldcraft expanding and homesteading being like, how do I raise chickens, and how do I get off of having, or how do I move away from city water? Or there's all these like different skills that are developing. And then in conjunction with one of those is that community building aspect. And I want to double down on where we started, because we were talking about at the end of your, if we look at it on the level of on the individual, you have your three pillars. You've got your
Mhm.
physical fitness, your mental fitness, and your spiritual fitness. And those pillars are stacked, they're not horizontal, they're vertical. The on the bottom, the way that I'm seeing it is on the bottom you have spiritual, which is your foundation, and then your middle is your mental, which would be your epistemology, and then on the top is your physical, which is your how you enact your what you believe, and how you do what you believe is right.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
would agree.
if you apply that, if you take that from an individual level and then you draw that up to the level of a small community, we were talking earlier about church groups,
Mhm.
and or we all we it was just kind of thrown in there. How have you seen that transition in community building? Because you just talked about having a range day with your church and then having a golf day with your church. Like, go can you would you be able to expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so, I'm probably not the best guy to ask that question just because kind of my, like, history with faith is that I was raised Catholic. I fell out of it in high school, as most people do that think that they know a lot more than they do. Um, Joined the military, and I kind of had, like, a short coming back to Jesus, as everybody does when you're in boot camp and you're like, "Oh, if I go to church, I can escape a couple hours of hazing on Sunday. So I'm religious again." And then, come back and once I go through all my training and stuff, I come back home because I've been a reservist my whole time. And I work and all that stuff, and my parents have always been active in the church and whatnot. And so my dad pretty much made the rule like, "Hey, if you're going to, still live at home and not have to pay rent and all that stuff, you either need to work or go to school and you need to go to church." And so I did a couple of college classes and then stopped going to school because I didn't like it, and I got a trade certification, but I worked, and then I would pretend to go to church, and I would just go dick around for an hour and all that, and I'd look up what the readings were gonna be that day, and so that when my dad kinda gave me a quiz when I got home, I could answer like, "Oh, this is what the reading was about." Um, and then I met my wife, and we didn't go to church or anything like that, and I ended up losing my job, and at this point, I was moved out of my house, or moved out of my parents' house, and I had a lot of time to just kill, and because I didn't have a job, and I was just collecting unemployment and applying to jobs, and I started to really think about, like, what do I believe? And started to try to go down that rabbit hole and went to church in a couple Sundays and didn't tell my girlfriend at the time, not wife. And then she figured out somehow, and she's like, "Why haven't you said anything?" Like, I'd be interested in going because she was also raised Catholic because she's, like, super Italian. And, and then once we got engaged and we were gonna have a kid, because we knew that as soon as we got married, we wanted to have a kid, and our engagement was super short, 6 months. And once we got engaged, we were like, "Okay, we know that we wanna get married in the church, and we know that we wanna make this something serious." So we started going through and really reevaluating and thinking about how we want to approach faith in a way that will be best for our family. And we had a lot of kind of back and forth on what to do, and we both continued to go on the route that we were essentially on, and all that. And then we ended up finding our church now that is extremely traditional, and it's great. And so one of the problems with me is that I have a lot going on, and I'm not as ingrained as I would like to be. So more recently, I started to volunteer for stuff at my church and trying to swindle my way into all the little meetings to figure out how we can do fundraisers and all that stuff. And the problem with our church too is that within Catholicism, there's a fraternity of priests that fall under what's known as the Society of Saint Pius X. So essentially, who Saint Pius X was is he was a pope in like the early to mid 1900s, and he was very against modernity, and he was very pro tradition. And so the history of the church has a lot of things that have happened, and there was a council in the 60s called Vatican II, which didn't change any dogma or beliefs or anything, but it changed the way that the mass and everything is practiced, and it kind of relaxed some things. And so this fraternity came about that said, hey, we want to stick with the tradition, right? It's been going strong for us for almost 2,000 years. We're going to keep on it. And so they kind of split, and there's a lot of kind of back and forth with the SSPX fraternity, if you will, in the churches and stuff. And people say they're not valid, and they are. They, you know, they are. So it's kind of interesting. But the problem with my church too is that it's very small, because the building that they were in years ago, they ended up moving out of, and like right now we're doing all these fundraisers to try to build a new church and all that stuff. But the community is very small, and we're working right now to try to rebuild it. So I know that was a very long-winded response. It did not answer your question, but right now I've met a lot of people that are very good influences. We've had range days, they have golf outings, different fundraisers, things to do. We had like a sportsman's dinner last year. They do every year, where they do like raffles and all that stuff. And it's just a huge fundraiser for the church. And actually, my wife has done more in the sort of church community. Like I said, we had just had a kid over the weekend, and we were able to get a meal train going. And so we've been getting people that have been dropping off meals all week so far for us, because of that church community. And obviously, that's just a small thing, but I have guys all around me that have land and can shoot on and all that. And right now, what I'm planning on doing is trying to figure out which of the guys are more similarly minded when it comes to preparedness and all that stuff, and are open to that. But like when we had our range day, we had guys that were, we had a couple of guys that were prior Army officers, and they were pretty cool. And we have guys that are competition shooters, and guys that are conservation officers, and all these different backgrounds. And like I said, there were even priests that were getting in there shooting guns too. But it's a good networking thing too, right? Like you get in and you have all these people with all these different backgrounds. And if you need renovations done in your house, or you need somebody to help you with raising chickens and building a chicken coop, like you have all these people that are there. So I apologize for the very lengthy response, but
No, it actually illustrates a dynamic that I think some of us. I'm just going to go back to the skepticism. So there has certainly been, if you look at both American history and history of church organizations through time, there have been ones that started or existed under the veneer of faith, and at the end of the day, they were much more focused on just like networking, right?
Mhm.
And so like we saw this. I think we saw this a lot in the kind of the what left from what we call the greatest generation in the post World War II generation. You're gonna fall off this chair, cat. Yep, there you go. Oh no, you made it. Sorry. This and you scratched me. Okay.
Well, now your eyes are gonna start puffing up.
I know. It's only a matter of time before I get itchy.
Hey,
Um,
speaking of Second Amendment and gun guys, that's the Ted Nugent song, is "Cat Scratch Fever," I think.
oh dear. Well, there we go. We have a new anthem for the day.
Hey,
Isn't I don't know that song. I don't.
really?
Yeah. I don't know anything from Ted Nugent.
Wow. That's a pretty popular one, but yeah.
If
Anyway,
I've heard it, I'll probably recognize it. But
I'm sure that if you heard it, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I heard that song once when I was like riding
yeah,
in the
yeah,
car when I
yeah,
was 12."
yeah, bro. I'm like a Cowboy Bebop gun culture guy, not a Ted Nugent gun culture guy. So like the real folk blues. So if you know that reference.
No, I'm just an idiot with an internet connection.
Welcome to the club. So there's been some skepticism, and I think there's room for skepticism. I don't have an Instagram post or a community note to comment on this, but I've seen it happen where um there's there you see these sort of church-ish organizations that are much more focused on getting people together and networking, and maybe some of them are focused around an individual who has a lot of influence in the community, or they're focused on the utility, let's call it the utility of having a community.
The
And
earthly benefits.
yeah, and so there's been this. I've been on a beat for the week on gun culture, and I've not and I brought it up, earlier this week on how I don't think that even in the beginning of this podcast that the core of gun culture is really on the utility of self defense. I think that's fruit. It's not the core. It's not the root. Like, we believe that we should be strong and capable. We should be men of courage and understand our capacity for violence so that we may have it under some form of self control, but also that we so that we do what is right, and so that when evil approaches, we are able to defend. We are able to oppose it, and when evil arises within our own selves, that we are able to challenge it. So,
Definitely.
so like one of the reasons why I think it's good for people to train is so that they understand. Um, this is going to even be a bit of an aggressive anecdote, but when you learn how when you train on how to do something like a night raid is not a defensive tactic. When you train on how to do something like battle drill 1 alpha for the army, which is I think that one's react to contact. Um, it's always couched. It's always framed in a position that you're going to do something. Whether you're patrolling an area or you're moving to a known location where there's an enemy position or whatever it is, right? And that the mindset and the mentality that goes into doing something like that is very different than learning how to draw a handgun for self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
And and as you're doing that, though, you have to contend with the moral framework, or the moral implications of what you're doing. Like, libertarians like to believe in the non-aggression rule. I don't, and I'm not going to go into an attack on libertarians right now, but there
Oh,
are,
I'm always down to do an attack.
yeah, I'm not there. I just, it's not. I don't think it. If we find time, we'll do that. We'll do that, right?
All right, we'll
Um,
we'll we'll put a bookmark in there. Circle back to it.
we'll bookmark it, right?
Yeah.
But when you do those things, you start, like when you learn, when you start thinking about that and anything other than the fantasy of a revenge story, it's
Mm-hmm.
like you're it's very different than a preparing for a self-defense scenario. And there's legal applications, there's moral applications, there's moral concerns, there's legal concerns. But the same thing goes for, where am I going? How am I doing this one? Where am I going with this one? It's the same thing goes for this issue with like community building and the church, and how you frame yourself in a community. Is, I think, gun culture is primarily concerned with being somebody of virtue that can withstand the moral pressure of complex environments,
Yeah.
so that one, you're not helpless and you're not alone and you're not subject to the whims of tyranny. And then the other part is so that you are not quickly swayed by emotionally driven arguments that drive people to commit atrocities. And so these are deeply seated moral convictions that people have, that I think introduce them into gun culture, and send them down this road of really desiring something virtuous. And so you see this in community building, and I think you see this in the church scenario, is that um the a church that builds its foundation on the gospel will build a network. That network can then be corrupted and people lose sight of the gospel. And when they do that, the network itself becomes corrupt. And so when you look at community building, like the idea of being in a community, you can't even really build a community purely on similar interest. Like it because when it's faced with a challenge, whether it's internal or external, it has to ground itself in some sort of foundation. And this is why I think gun culture grounding itself in the Second Amendment has survived so well, is because it's based on a fundamental series of ideas that we believe in to varying levels. But now, where we're at in our community is that we're reevaluating that, not whether or not it's true, but how well do we really know it?
Yeah.
Eh,
Yeah. And
Like,
and I can take your idea a step further too. And that if we want to start getting aggressive with things, whether you want to believe it or not, there's like spiritual warfare going on, right? Like you can be the guy that was in the French countryside during World War II and just not believing that a war was going on when, mortar rounds and gunshots and stuff are happening all around the countryside. And that's essentially where you're at. And the the thing that's crazy about faith and that something that I had to, because I'm a very skeptical guy in general. Like I like to have 100% knowledge of something before I commit to it. And unfortunately, you can't do that with something like faith, right? So something that really did help me is that there's a guy by the name of Soren Kierkegaard who was like I think he was Danish philosopher, and he essentially said that you can get very lost in the infinite and very lost in the finite, um, and that it's important that you don't try to dabble in the infinite sort of thing. So basically, like if you are going to look at faith, you shouldn't try to answer every single question before you commit to it. You should just take that leap of faith because it's technically the most free thing that you could do. Um, and so I think that one of the problems is that there's a lot of people that are even, Christians that don't believe that there is a sort of spiritual warfare going on, and it's been going on since the beginning of time, since before Christianity was in existence. Like there was still instances of possessions and things like that because the entire realm of the demonic have existed longer than humanity has, and so we can look at the news every day. And I said before that I don't really keep up with current events, but there's still instances where you can go online and watch hours and hours and hours of interviews with exorcists that give you stories on things that they've seen, like insanity that they've seen performing these exorcisms, and that there's like demonic forces that do want to corrupt you. And, whenever you have these moral dilemmas, like the old like cartoonism where there's like the little devil on your shoulder and the little angel on your shoulder, that's kind of a real thing. Like the Catholic teaching is that everybody has a guardian angel and they're going to try to sway you in the correct direction. But there's things that try to tempt you and there's things that try to make you do the wrong choice. And it can be something as simple as, hey, I don't want to get out and work out today, and all the way to, you know, hey, I'm just gonna have another drink. I'm just gonna have another one, and going even further into all these things, and you have kind of the seven deadly sins, but then you have the seven virtues, and you have like the four cardinal virtues with the three theological virtues, and they all kind of relate. But I think that one of the main reasons why community is important is because in any sort of war that you think of, who's gonna win, right? Like the organized fighting force who has a motive, or the sole guy who's just gonna John Wick it the whole time.
Hmm.
And you can look on, videos of all these things where after the Roe v. Wade overturn, there was people that were out in the streets that were protesting, that were, pro-abortion and all that. And once you really start diving into uh like the satanic side of things, abortion is one of their sacraments. Like it's a human sacrifice. I don't believe that abortion is a medical process. I believe it is a human sacrifice, and I might be the crazy one, but I don't know. But there was all these people that were out on the street like just praying, and these people that were pro-abortion were like convulsing and having these crazy reactions to people just praying. And it's just one of those things where like if you just watch it without a sort of a bias behind it, you're gonna look at it and be like, okay, maybe there is something to this whole like faith debacle.
Yeah. So as somebody who's formally educated in philosophy, I have to admit that I am not well read in Soren Kierkegaard. He's just not. He's not the philosopher that I know enough about to speak knowledgeably on it.
He's kind of low key. I only know a little bit because when I was really having
I-
uh, that
I'm
conflict internally with faith.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the name, but I'm not familiar with his writing. So I don't I just don't want to speak authoritatively on it. It would be disrespectful to the craft. But what I can say is that where I think you're just I want to double down on this one. There's that verse in the New Testament that says we do not fight against flesh and blood, but the powers and principalities of this dark world. And there is I want to double down into your your conversation on spiritual warfare, because it not only is it relevant to our time, but as you said, it's relevant to all time. So before I get too far into it, I think one way that we mistake that conversation, and this is actually more spontaneous now, is that we think of the spiritual war as analogous to the physical conflicts we experience in the world, when in reality, when we're in very much so in reality, it might be the other way around, where what we see on the physical world is an analogy for what we understand in the spiritual realm. Of war on earth is war between peoples, and it's corrupted. It's corrupted by the noetic effects of sin and how we are blinded by our own sinfulness. Whereas the war in heaven, as you might call it, is not. It is angels versus demons. It is the light versus the dark in that sense. And I understand the skepticism to approach. I understand why there's skepticism against the spiritual warfare conversation, because I have been the skeptic of that as well.
Well, it sounds
I
like crazy talk if you're not
well,
warmed
and
up to it.
well, yes, it can sound like crazy talk, and also there are no shortage of charlatans who commit to it, who commit to the sales pitch of spiritual warfare.
Yeah, I would agree.
But the existence of a false gospel is evidence of the existence of a true gospel. Um,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
existence
that's
of
a good point.
the existence of corruption, of a corrupt thing, is evidence to the potentiality of a non-corrupt thing.
Well, it's like the saying, like when people say, like, if God exists, then why do bad things happen? And it's like, well, if God doesn't exist, then why can good still come out of bad? Why do good things happen if God doesn't exist?
Yeah, the problem of evil is a very classic argument, and if you're a Catholic and you're familiar with Augustine or
Yep,
Augustinian,
Augustine.
you know,
Mhm.
I pronounce it wrong because I'm Reformed. Um, so I come from kind of the Reformed Protestant milieu is probably the right way of saying it, or at least that's where I've found myself most active. And so, spiritual warfare there's a lot of concerns about what we talk about when we talk about spiritual warfare, and one of them is certainly the mysticism attached to it,
Mhm.
where it's like, let's use a cultural reference. There's a TV show called Supernatural, and it's an entertaining show that's been going on forever, and I don't know if it's still running, but I remember when I was watching it, like, it was a very entertaining series, because you basically had these two protagonists, these brothers who were like hunting monsters, and they
Yeah.
were engaging in, and eventually they ran out of folklore monsters, and they had to go into like angels and demons and stuff, and demon possession, and the devil, and Michael, and all these other crazy
Okay.
characters were introduced to it. And in all of this system, you kind of had what would be referred to as like a hard magic system. uh
Okay.
Are you familiar with the difference between, like, in novels, a hard magic system versus a soft magic system?
Not at all.
Okay, so if you've read Lord of the Rings, or if you like Lord of the Rings and
Well, like
what's
Narnia.
yeah, well, not Narnia. I'm gonna use Lord of the Rings. We're gonna engage in the meme. All of the millennial generation can be determined between those who grew
Lord
up
of
on
the
Lord of
Rings
the
and
Rings
Harry Potter.
and Harry Potter. But Harry Potter is a hard magic system, whereas Lord
Okay.
of the Rings is a soft magic system.
Okay,
And
I understand now where you're coming from.
and so in Harry Potter, there are rules, there are ways that things function. It's sort of alchemical. You apply, and that's something that makes that world so beautiful and believable. Because, like, I've seen the movies and they were well done. I haven't read the books, but whereas Lord of the Rings is a much more of a soft magic system, where you don't really see people casting specific spells, or using, like, having to measure their mana or whatever it
Mhm.
is. You know what I mean? And so so one of the things that becomes difficult when it comes to spiritual warfare, which is funny too, because you can drive it back to one of the earliest episodes we did on the podcast on like tactical Gnosticism, which is this idea that like if you do the thing, if you do the ritual the right way, you get the reward, you get the payout, and neither gunfights um nor spiritual warfare are exactly like that. They're not like this easy mechanical um rubric like that. I
Right.
don't I there are certainly strengths in it. There are certainly consistencies. Like the Bible does not flippantly use the power of the name of Christ. And so we I think there's room for skepticism, but the thing that I have an issue with skepticism, like you brought up with the problem of evil, is the presence of skepticism is not enough. It's not, you can't say, well, I don't know, and then never pursue the answer.
Exactly.
And
And
that's what,
that's one of the problems that I see with people that don't have a hard line idea is like it's just laziness. It's just I just don't understand how you can look at the fact that there are these big ideas and these big questions out there, philosophical, theological, which, is just a brand of philosophy, and then just be like, "Oh, there's all these people that have dedicated their lives for thousands of years to trying to answer these questions. I'm not even gonna take a stab."
yeah, the hubris of man is to say that because I can't understand it doesn't mean it's not real. Like it's not true. Well, if I don't understand it, it can't be true. Like I can't understand why somebody would believe in a faith system. It's like that doesn't affect the validity of the system.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know.
I mean, that's are you I'm sure that you're familiar with Aquinas.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's one of the perfect examples of, like, they actually I think that it was on that Twitter post, that caused us to get into communication, where some guy came on and it was just immediately like, "Haha, religion is dumb. Anybody that believes in religion is dumb." And I'm like, "Well, like, you can look at Aquinas, who was around in the 1200s, who was answering questions that people have today that they think is like a, "Oh, haha, I asked you this question," like, if these, like, weird questions that try to, like, disprove faith, and it's like Aquinas answered them and all of the other, like, adjacent questions to that in the 1200s, like, nothing that you're saying is new, and how can
Yeah.
you go as far as to say that everybody that believes in the faith is dumb when you have, minds like that?
hmm It has been so I went to school for philosophy and theology. I did a double major and theology. I mean, again, it's basically like I double majored in the same subject, so that was fun.
So
And
what you're telling me is that you're unemployed?
shut 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 your mouth. I'm employed because I'm talking to you on a podcast.
Oh, okay.
uh oh gosh, that digs deeper than you thought it did. But yes, I am currently unemployed. I have been running a business for a year.
I'm
So
envious.
well, that is for another time. So I do many things. But one of them is this, and it is not, it is interesting to see that, because it's like you hear that, you grow up hearing these challenges, and then you recognize that these questions are not new, and then the answers to them are not new. And then you might ask, well, where do you start? And this is where you get into a difference between the history of philosophy and the study of philosophy. And like you could see, well, at this time this was the common belief, and at this time that was the common belief, and then at this time this was the common belief, and you saw this culture kind of shift from a pre-Renaissance belief, and then you had like religious humanism in the Renaissance period, which gave way to rational humanism in the Enlightenment era, and that dominated until rationalism collapsed under the weight of World War I. And then you had postmodernism, which was essentially the only thing that is real is nothing is real, and then that was like the existentials and the French Continentals, and then you had all these other kind of chaotic things. But like if we're going to look at the course of history, that we know that is not a firm foundation. Eventually it'll give way.
Mhm.
Like building your foundation on just doubt is not like, or is a conscious choice between committing to understanding anything at all versus just doubt. Like I'm not envious of somebody who is overcome by doubt. But the answer is, but I challenge you, if that is who you are, like take courage and pursue something that you can understand to be true. And while we may not be able to state with absolute certainty by the ability of man's rationality to say that this is true about the universe ad infinitum, it doesn't mean that we aren't capable of discerning things and in pursuit of truth and in pursuit of why is it that we desire community, and why is it that we choose morality, and what is our moral foundation? Because if we leave that to just doubt, you'll be paralyzed in the gunfight and you won't be able to do the right thing.
Oh, 100%. And I would say too that, because in my civilian job, I'm an engineer, and one of the things that will come up is that, obviously, like one of the biggest things that I do for work is like continuous improvement stuff. So we'll see an issue and we'll say, okay, every 10th part that's ran, this weird thing comes up. And then I think, okay, I think, I'll study it and look at it and try to figure out what the cause of the issue is, and I'll propose a fix. And the first thing I'll do is I'll propose a fix that will try to, mend that issue, and not just in a sense of, putting a band-aid on it, but actually in the sense of preventing that issue from occurring. And then I'll immediately start attacking it. Okay, what if these conditions happen? Is this still going to be, you know, stable? Is this still going to work fine? All that. And if I believe without a reasonable doubt that the fix that I have in place is going to work and is going to attack the root of that issue, I'll put it in place. And, you know, it might work forever, or 3 months down the road, another weird condition that I didn't think of might be met, and it might fail. And then I try to
Mm-hmm.
refine it and patch it and all that stuff. And I think that that's kind of one of the things that you need to really do with your faith and your belief system, is look at what has the least amount of ways that you can attack it in like a truest sense, right? And there's going to be all these like little rabbit holes that you're going to go down, and then commit to it. And if down the line you find something that might expose what you believe in or might negate it, try to come up with a counter argument and do what
Yeah,
you can.
wrestle with it.
Exactly. Yeah, just wrestle with it. And if that ends up defeating it, well, then you're going to have to find something that's kind of similar that has fixed that root cause. And if you can't find anything, then I don't know what to tell you. I guess you broke the universe, right? You're the first one. Um, but that's kind of one of the things that when I was wrestling with my own faith and trying to affirm what I believed in, to myself, or I guess confirm would be the better word. Um, there was the want to go back to something traditional, because I could see that there was all these issues in the world, and I don't want something that's worldly. I don't want something that's so focused on what's going on, and or I guess that's so like influenced by it. And I used to date this girl, and she went to this very like non-denominational large church. And just the it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth, because I could tell that it was ran more like a business than anything. And then there's multiple campuses that are being opened up and all that, and it kind of seemed like a weird offshoot, because I'm like, I thought, all of this falls under like Protestant belief and the solas and all that. But then you're going to open up these multiple campuses that kind of makes the head pastor that runs this kind of like a pope in his own way. And, that kind of goes against what you guys believe, right? And then there was the whole like lack of like the sacred aspect to it. And I was thinking, like, it doesn't make sense to me. And maybe it's just how I was conditioned growing up, that you have the creator of the universe and everything that has ever been known, and anything that exists that is not known, and you're not going to treat it in the sacred way, right? Like, you have the trinitarian God who took his only son, sent him down to become man, fully man, fully God, and be crucified for our salvation. That's something that I should, treat very respectfully in a very sacred way. And that's kind of what I wrestled with when I was coming back to the faith was I had kind of this bad taste in my mouth from things like that. And those were like the gaps that were being attacked, that I needed to fill somehow. And ultimately, like most people that strive for that like traditional aspect, they start looking at like Eastern Orthodoxy and stuff like that. And long story short, it wasn't for me. But I don't need to necessarily go into that. But
Are you so I like so I'm Protestant Reformed and you're Catholic, and if we were born in the 90s or we were talking in the 90s, I think we were supposed to be enemies, but I think that day has passed quite a bit. Or I don't know, you could go back to like, the wars in England before the Americas, and there's all these this long Catholic Protestant conflicts. And
there's been Catholic conflict too, Protestant
yeah.
Protestant conflict, and
Oh yeah. Mankind is wicked, it knows no bounds. And so it's interesting. So you brought up this idea of the sacred, and are you familiar with the medieval concept of the sacred and the profane, which is still can be still found in some Muslim cultures?
um, I don't believe I have. If
Okay.
start talking about it, and I might understand the concept without knowing the like title of it.
Okay, so in like a short summary of what the idea of the sacred and the profane was is that that which was sacred was let's see, that which was sacred was between a man and his family and a man and God. And so you could say the Sabbath is what it says, keep the Sabbath sacred and
Mhm.
or keep, for it is holy. Do you also have examples of maybe like divine responsibilities, and you have things that a family or a person must attend to? But then there's also the profane, which is like working in the fields. And in the medieval era, one of the ways that this was represented is that you had like what was referred to as profane was a man's work. It's like you're a blacksmith, you're a farmer, you're a knight, you're a guardsman, you're a you have these roles. You're gonna, if you have land, you have to farm it. You're a serf, you have responsibilities. But then there's also the sacred, which is not exactly personal in the sense of like it's whatever your personal belief is, but it was something set apart from the profane world. And in our and I saw this in Muslim cultures where the anything that was outside of the home was profane. And it wasn't profane as in it was wicked purely. Like this isn't it can be taken to a Gnostic level where you have or even like you can be taken to even a Platonic, a Platoist level where the mind is sacred and the body is profane, which I would caution against because that doesn't end well. And I mean, that's not a good argument against Platonism, but I'm not going to make an argument in this podcast, in this episode. But instead, one of the challenges that the Reformation brought with the introduction of Protestantism was within from what I understand, within a Catholic system at the time, there was still a separation between the sacred and the profane. The job of the priest was a sacred job. And then the tasks of the people were profane in the sense that but you still had to do them. Like they were no less responsible. They just still had to be done. And then instead of we're in a criticism that was brought up against Protestantism is that while Protestantism claimed to raise the clergy up to the level of the sacred and everyone could be involved in the priesthood, what it produced was it lowered everything down. You see this in like you could almost apply it to sort of a Marxism socialism problem, is that instead of
Mhm.
raising up the poor, you're just cutting down the wealthy. So
Yeah,
like
I've heard of that.
and so like as a reformed guy, as a Protestant, it's still something that is relevant because one of the challenges that Protestantism can deal with is it instead of engaging every act as if it is sacred, whether it is your job during the day or it is your activities with your family or it is your fixing the car, changing the oil, It claims to want to make every activity that a man does as sacred. But what it can do though is it can also backfire and take even activities like prayer and the sacraments and make them nothing more than symbolic. And so,
It's like inflation in a sense. Like if
yeah,
everything's sacred, then nothing is sacred.
exactly. You're right on the money there. It's like if everything's sacred, nothing really is sacred, and that's
Yep.
kind of an odd way to think about it. And so where I've seen things go awry with more of a Catholic tradition is where um the sacred becomes mystical, and it's just like I don't actually have to care about it. I just have to go do the thing. And so something like a confession is turned into changing your oil, but it's your spiritual oil. It's like, I'm not doing so well. It's like, oh, I just have to do it because that's how you do it. And it's like, well, everyone in Christianity can struggle with that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, it's just two different brands of the same problem.
Well, I think that the issue with this is that the the thing with the sacred side of faith, which not I want to be careful I word this. Not everything in the idea of faith needs to be treated as like a sacred thing, right? Like you can I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. Like there's very like mundane things that you can do um to strengthen your faith and like um I guess I can't think of the best way to word that, but essentially what I'm getting at is that um not every single thing within the faith is sacred. However, the things that are more sacred, or that are sacred in general, should be held to that regard. So when you look at like the sacraments,
Mm-hmm.
um, like marriage is one of them. Marriage is like a very sacred thing, and it should be treated as a very sacred thing. And tons of people have failings in their marriage, and myself included. I haven't always been the best husband that I should be. I haven't always been the best father. But when you look at it as, hey, this is a sacred thing and I'm spitting in the face of it, it helps motivate you to become better. And so when you have very lukewarm Catholics, which there's tons of them, um, you have the issue where yeah they'll go into confession, which is a sacred thing, and they will confess their sins, and they'll be back the next week doing the same thing. Or conversely, they'll confess their sins, um, commit more sins, more, because in the Catholic faith we have mortal and venial sins. They'll commit mortal sins, and then they'll go and they'll partake in the Eucharist, which is the most sacred thing that you can do, because we believe that it is the actual body and blood of Christ through transubstantiation and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
you have the lukewarm ones that go ahead and do things like that. But the 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 thing with that is that I don't think that we should be looking at the worst case, or I wouldn't even call them the worst case. I would say that they're kind of like a mid-level, right? Like they're still going through the motions, they're trying to do it, but their mind isn't there, their soul isn't there. They're not taking it as seriously as it should be. um but we shouldn't look at that and see that as a thing that kind of negates the idea, right? Like you have within the original, apostles, you have one of the apostles that is corrupted, and he turns in Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Does that negate Christianity because one of the original Christians was bad? Or, one of the original founders of Christ who knew him personally was bad or corrupt? Like, I don't think that it does. Um, so I think that the sacred aspect of it is more mystical on the Orthodox side. Actually, I think that the between the schism, like with the Orthodox and the Catholics, the Catholic side is a lot more of like logic. The logical foot is put in the front, and then the mystical is kind of in the back, versus the Orthodox is the other way around. Because with the Catholics, you have like Aquinas, and you have all of these other great minds that are very like logical in their approach to faith. And then like what I've seen with the Orthodox is it's very like, it's a lot more mystical on it.
Yeah, I don't have a good introduction into contemporary orthodoxy. I have only witnessed it from distance. So like I wouldn't want to speak to that. Just clearly is in like even my conversations that I've had with um what is considered orthodoxy, like Eastern Orthodoxy, is very, very shallow and surface level. So like
Mhm.
I know that there are scholars and participants in that environment that would be worth talking to on the matter. I don't know, but what I can say then is, like, we are humans, and humans do things. You can see this in any level, any sort of belief system, whether it's scientism or Islam or Christianity or Buddhism. There's going to be those who are genuine in their faith and those who are lukewarm. And I think this goes to the testament of the that like there's a difference between true belief and just going through the motions. But you can also, I mean, you could even go so far as to like apply this to gun culture, and you could go
Oh
this to
yeah.
you could apply this to anything. Like even let's just say politics is your religion, right? It's like, well, are you an activist, or are you just a couch sitter that votes once every 4 years? And it's like even like a great, even the comical metaphor being, hey, whoa, off, not, oh, okay, big stretch cat. Um, the comical metaphor being like, do you even know what the barrel velocity of a Mark 18 is, bro? Are you
Yeah.
even gun culture, bro? Do you even know, bro? It's a joke, but it's pretty humorous.
Oh, you like this band? Name every album.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Even one of my favorite bands, I don't know all the albums. Uh,
What is it?
Emery. I grew up with the band Emery.
I've
I don't.
I've seen the name, but I don't know if I've ever listened to them.
Another one of my favorite bands is Brand New.
Okay, yeah, I know
Uh,
Brand New.
I know, but I only really know like three of their albums.
It's
So
funny actually because earlier, me and my wife are doing some housework and kind of reorganizing things and all that, and I'd put on some old music that I used to listen to all the time, and it was the band Chiodos, and and then I take it off because I'm going to do some work in the other room, and I'm just listening to it on my own, being nostalgic for 2007 and all that, when I was still in, middle school, and then I come back and Brand New, she was listening to, like, I Prevail and Brand New and stuff on the TV, and I was like, "Huh," or no, Pierce the Veil and Brand New, that's what it
Pierce the
was.
Veil, yeah.
Yeah, so that
Uh,
was kinda funny.
yeah, so it's funny that we're talking about spiritual warfare on this one, and I did a short episode on it earlier, and I want to tie in two ideas together, and this will probably be the one of the last things that you and I talk about. Um,
But I'm having
but
so much fun.
I know we could keep going if it's if it works, because that's the best thing about a long form podcast. We're not limited by, commercials and channels and stuff.
Well,
Um,
I'm on paternity leave, I don't need to be at work tomorrow, you don't need to be at work tomorrow.
Existential crisis.
You just need to think tomorrow.
Well, we'll see.
Put
Um,
put that degree to work.
right.
No, dude, I really wish that there was more, like, applicable, things to go into with a philosophy degree because, like, the idea of philosophy has been one of my favorite things to really dig into, and it's one of those things where you read it, and then you start to hate it, and it just makes you wanna read it more.
Yeah, it's there's certainly no shortage of like navel gazing fools, but one of the things that I am thankful for is I went to I served in the military. I did some stuff afterwards, and then I went to school on the GI Bill. And I went to school older. I was 25 when I started at the university, and being older, like I wasn't going from I was homeschooled, so I wasn't going from like
Nice.
writing papers and taking tests in high school to writing papers and taking tests in college. I had this sort of long break of life experience, so
Yeah.
that when I went back to school, I knew a lot more of what I wanted to study, and I wanted to engage in this one. And so being inspired by some characters like Jordan Peterson, and also a desire to write and read and engage in culture in that way, that was one of the driving forces. And so I wasn't going into massive debt to get a degree that wasn't going to be applicable towards a a career. But so then my struggle has been, or what has been more difficult for me, is actually just the what you'd call the mundane, like in our earlier explanation, like the profane. And
Mhm.
when I am less grounded in faith, I spiral in those directions. But there's an event. One of them is, I think it was in that post that you were talking about on Twitter. You made a commentary on how one of the reasons why, perhaps the core reason why, the Afghan war ended so horribly is that the people in Afghanistan had a belief system, and the American invasion of Afghanistan was this sort of multicultural amalgamous blob of perhaps imperialism or a vengeance, and I'm not going to go into, I'm sorry, as a man who went to war in Afghanistan, I got to witness the strength of faith of the Afghani population in opposition to what was going on, for better and for worse. And I thought that was an interesting, it was like an uncomfortable observation, is that the people in Afghanistan had something that they believed in, and the American exit from Afghanistan was in many ways dictated by a lack of belief. There just
Mhm.
wasn't anything there.
Yeah, and it sucks to think that the US, I would not even consider the US to be like a Christian nation anymore. And the foundations of the US are 100% Christian, right? But the way that the majority of people are today, and the way that the government is, and the way that the school system is, and all that stuff do not lend well to uh, you know, Christianity or faith in general. It's very secular. And so, you have like essentially two different generations fighting in this war in Afghanistan for very secular reasons. Like, yeah, okay, there's the whole thing with 9/11 and in response to that and all that, but you know the average guy that was going around and fighting in Afghanistan didn't have that always at the forefront of their mind. There wasn't, and correct me if I'm wrong because I didn't go there, but from the people I've talked to and the things I've observed from talking to people that I have, is that it was just kind of something that they had to do. And I think that the guys that probably had the original invasion and the years after that, that were 9/11 was still fresh in their mind. But, we were getting guys that were joining under me, and they were born after 9/11. So it's like, how can you be emotionally driven by that if you weren't even there when it happened? Like, I was in kindergarten when it happened.
Yeah.
But then
I
on the
think
flip side with the Taliban, they saw it as a holy war. Like these you know, invaders, these non-Muslim invaders are coming in to change our way of life.
some of them certainly did. It wasn't universal, but that was a good selling point for the Taliban.
Yeah.
It was a good selling point. And it with mixed levels of genuine approach, for sure. I think to the American mind, the idea of a suicide bomber sounds ridiculous. Like, why would you strap a bomb to yourself and blow yourself up? And to the American mind, it's really hard. It can be really difficult to comprehend, and because the way that the American mind approached that type of conflict is that it was sort of a it didn't have a framework for understanding that at all times. There are definitely, it's not like it never was addressed, but you can't take a secularist, atomized society where your sense of meaning is derived purely from yourself, and argue that, and come to the conclusion that a suicide bomb is the way to go.
Well, I think that the biggest way to instruct somebody on like kind of the benefits of a suicide bomber are when you're actually, when you're in the military and you have that one junior that you can't get rid of that just screws everything up, and you're thinking like, I wish there was a good way to get rid of this guy. And then you think like, hey, maybe if I told him that he'll be set for life in the afterlife if he straps himself in this vehicle, we weld the door shut and we weld a garbage can to the front of it and have him drive into this building, everybody's problem is solved.
Yeah, I mean, there's that heat. There is that, and there's also, like, you will bring great honor to your family, and to
Yeah.
a culture that isn't as ingrained in an honor system. It's hard to communicate that, but, like, you will go down in history as a great name, and bring honor to your family is hard to is is a hard argument against somebody who believes in something more like atomized individualism.
Yeah,
And and
definitely.
and yeah, like I think it's Augustine in his Conversations on Just War Theory that brings up the difference between jus in bello and jus ad bellum, and what that can look like in this case too is jus in bello is like just action in war. And as an enlisted guy who went to Afghanistan, I saw a great like desire for purpose and direction amongst the fellow enlisted men,
Hmm.
right? And so even in the officers that we worked with, it was like there was this desire to do what was right, and there were mixed levels of that, and that doesn't need to get expounded on yet, but it was very consistent that like everyone had their reason, and some of their reasons were very personal, and some of them were very patriotic, and some of them were very I wouldn't call it religious in, well, they were religious in their own right, but they were sort of like, it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do because these people that we are fighting against are committing atrocities against populations. And then you could take all those different attitudes and you could combine them together, and you got a lot of the mentality of the average infantryman in Ranger Battalion of like, yeah, we're going to fight people who are doing evil things, and they attacked our country, or there was 9/11, or we don't want it to happen here, and every person had their motivation. But I think where we saw it lacking was on the jus ad bellum level, which is the justification for war. And that came across, and that was translated down to the man who was preparing for his night raid, when the mission set that was handed down to them by people that they never met in their life or never would meet, or their rules of engagement were determined by people who had no skin in the game. So if your rules of engagement are being determined by somebody who not only doesn't have to deal with the consequences of that, but doesn't even have participation in the justification for war itself, and seeing it as the right thing or wrong thing to do, which can happen over time, especially when you have a 20-year war where the politicians who sent you to war are no longer the politicians writing the rules of engagement because they've moved on to different positions. They've left the
Hmm.
House and gone to the Senate, or they've left the position of being a general and gone to work for
Lockheed
who
Martin.
Lockheed Martin. And I know the industrial war or the war industrial complex gets a lot of comically enough, I think they get a lot of darts thrown at them, and I wonder what it would be like if they gave us a response. Like if if like if Raytheon gave like a cultural response to the citizens of the United States and wasn't trying to appease some sort of weak political position, but rather be like, this is what we're doing. And that it would be an interesting argument to have. Kind of, but I don't, because I
Yeah,
don't.
I wish that we lived in a place that it was that's something that could happen.
I mean, it can. People do things like it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's just like even it's. I wish it could just be so simple, but I could think of even back to the days of being in Ranger Battalion. Like you didn't want the media to know what you're doing, not because you didn't want them to see your dirty laundry, but because the only thing that they were going to do was throw hit pieces at you and land
Yeah.
people in prison, because it was field expedient to put a private in prison. It was a better field expedient to put like a corporal in prison than it was to deal with like a major issue in a conflict zone. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
I mean that we so I had to go to a course fairly recently, like just a career course, so I can be eligible to promote. And one of the things that they had kind of harped on was that story from, I think it was like probably it was somewhere around like 2010, plus or minus a few years, where those Marine Scout snipers had pissed on the bodies of the dead Taliban. You remember that whole thing?
I remember hearing about it. I think I was on deployment when it happened, and it was probably a jeering conversation that disappeared within a year
Yeah.
in our
So
in my circle, in my community at the time.
okay. Yeah, so they cover that, and one of the guys that was in my little group, because we had a huge class, and so we had like these little groups that were all assigned to one of the instructors. There was like 20 of us, and we would have these open discussions and stuff in a smaller group. And he was a scout sniper, and they're a very, very, very tight knit community.
Yep.
Um, and so he was told he had to before he went to this course, like, hey, they are going to bring this up. Don't get emotionally heated, because the problem with it is that it's really easy for people to make a blanket statement and say, "Hey, that was the wrong thing to do," which I can agree. Like, you probably shouldn't do that. Um, but when you start really expanding on the whole thing, and this dude went, and I don't think he took a breath talking for like 15 minutes, and he was explaining the whole backstory and all this stuff. And essentially, these guys were on this in this OP that were watching these dudes, like, ambush Americans and, do all this stuff and defile their bodies, and, uh, and then they got into, like, a long firefight, and a couple of their guys had gotten hit and all that stuff, and afterward, it was, one of those things that just happened, and we can justify it either way, or say that it was wrong or whatever, but ultimately, like, we're not in their place, we don't know the full context of what happened, from their perspective. We have the official story, but, it starts to get difficult when you have people that are so far removed, right? Like, that was somewhere around 13, 14 years ago, plus or minus a few, and those guys aren't in the Marine Corps anymore. Like, we aren't we can't sit down with these guys and have a conversation where everything's still fresh, and we can't be there with them and all that. So, it gets difficult to have these conversations when we can look at it from hindsight and say, "Okay, that was wrong to do," or we could say, "Hey, they shouldn't have done it, but they should have not filmed it, and then we wouldn't have had this problem." And, like, the justification starts to get really muddy, when you start adding, like, the human dimension to things, and the capacity for emotions to influence your behavior for the good or for the bad.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Like, you can understand why somebody had done something like that, not justify it, not say it was the right thing to do, but then still also recognize that whatever punishment was handed down to them was not right either.
Yeah, yeah,
You
that's
know,
that's a really good way to sum it up.
because it's like, you've had, what is it? There were, I'm not going to get the name down. So there was the famous event that Blackwater got smeared
Oh, yeah, that
across the media
spearheaded the
for.
whole Fallujah thing.
Like, it was like, there was the famous event that happened with them. I wish I can't remember all the
Are you
names, but
talking
it's
about when they got hung
Nassar
from the
Square.
bridge?
Nassar Square,
Yeah.
and how like, the events that took place, and I think Sean Ryan has, had them on his show. I know Trump pardoned the 4 that were imprisoned or put in prison for it. Um, but you see the events take place in a battlefield environment where, uh, the you see the events take place on a battlefield environment where these atrocities take place, and you see the wickedness of man before you, and they go to there is nothing there are things, but, like, you could imagine a string of the most egregious and horrendous events taking place, and being caught in the moment of, like, what the hell is going on. And and while, I would say it's not tactically wise to be overcome by emotion, be it vengeance or otherwise, it's understandable, but still not justified. But the fact that they end up getting hung out to dry by their own government for an event that, I mean, really pales in comparison to how many people were hit by drone strikes that weren't
Mhm.
responsible, that you kind of go, "Hey, this isn't right, man." Like, you get it's easy to get jaded there. And if this is like going to be the goofiest way to segue it. But I did a I
This is
the
why you need a group of guys with similar beliefs.
right, yeah, it's going to be the goofiest way to segue it. But it came to our attention earlier this week that the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis hosted something that it advertised itself as a family friendly event that was a demon summoning for children,
Oh, geez.
right? And so it's like, yeah, it doesn't look good, right? Everything from the advertisements to the write-ups to the defense of it, and you could go into James Lindsay's Mott and Bailey, you could go into, all these different criticisms of it. But when you go back to a cultural level, you compare that to the American war in Afghanistan, and it's like the people who ultimately had some victory at great cost, and I don't know if you'd call it a victory either, but when America left Afghanistan the way that it did,
Mhm.
the Afghani the Taliban, with their religious fervor, could at least say things like, well, we don't do demon worshiping in our yard, kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's like we don't have our artistic institutions hosting demon summoning experiences, and I don't know how somebody who doesn't have a moral foundation or a belief system would handle that, other than, well, it doesn't mean anything. It's just artistic. And
Oh yeah, look at like Bohemian Grove even.
I've only heard hearsay of Bohemian Grove. I'm not read up on it.
Yeah, but in short, Bohemian Grove is s- it's a place that hosts these meetings for the social club that are generally like very powerful men and politicians and stuff, and only men are allowed in it. Which everyone should have a good like men's club to go hang out with. But they have these things that are, and the only person that's ever been able to get in there and film it, funny enough, is Alex Jones, and that's what makes this hilarious. But the whole thing with Bohemian Grove is that you have these um, things that are portrayed as like an artistic expression, and they're like very ancient uh, rituals to Canaanite gods, which, when you start looking into the history of all these like old Canaanite gods, um, there is, I believe that it's Baal, who's the
Yeah, yeah, you have Baal, Baal, or
yep,
Baal,
yep,
Baal.
yep, who's the
My Midwestern accent's coming out. It's Baal.
yeah, yeah. I'm from the Midwest too, so we're on the same page. But he's the Canaanite god of child sacrifice, and so Bohemian Grove is like this thing that's made up of all these like super high members in our political system and all that. And then you have things like, are you familiar with like the Finders documents and stuff that was like an FBI document?
I haven't read them.
So essentially there's it kind of confirms that there's like human trafficking, or child sex trafficking rings that are,
Affiliated.
yeah, affiliated with members in our government and everything.
Yeah,
And
well, everyone like we're still living in the time, like Epstein is still like a recent memory. Okay, like
well,
I'm not.
it just evolved into a meme, right? Like all it did is that people just made the meme of, oh, Epstein didn't kill himself. And then, like the recent song of Richmond North of Richmond, he makes a reference to miners on an island, but like nobody's doing anything.
I disagree with you in saying that nobody's doing anything. Um,
I guess nobody I'm aware of is doing anything, but I'm
well, I'll disagree with you again.
all right.
You are doing something about it because you're building a community. You're a part of
Hey.
something, right? Like this is where the solution is not always as theatrical as God through Moses parting the Red Sea. And I know that people talked about this in history as things happen gradually, then they happen suddenly. And there was 400 years of captivity before the Israelites were freed from their Egyptian slaveholders.
Mhm.
But it was not. But it was in the lifetime of Moses that they went from that to the border of Canaan, which would become Israel. And so, but what we are seeing, and this is not to diminish the gravity of a situation of this kind, but you are seeing decentralization. People are not putting their faith in government leaders. They're not putting their faith in politics as the solution to all of their ilk, all of their problems. and they're saying, you know what, I'm not going to invest all of my life and my mental energy and my spiritual energy into fretting over what is happening in Washington. Um, and that's a good thing. It's good universally, but it's also good in this situation. And so that is, I think that's, I mean, that's kind of the point. No, it's not that. And there may not be some sort of big political and cultural event where somebody is going, videotaping the investigation and the release of the black book or whatever, but there is a response that is happening, and people are doing something about it, and they're saying, hey, look, if I can't trust my leaders, if we can't trust our government leaders this way with that level of spiritual guidance of our community, then we need it. Then we're going to turn away from a centralized naturalist or centralized approach to our culture and our politics and return to a decentralized one where it's like, hey, look, I can't fix Washington, but I can make your life better. And that is not something to be shied away from.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. It kind of there's like passive effects from the Epstein investigation that are good. So the Epstein investigation, as far as I know, is non-existent because all the people that are going to be spearheading it are going to be found guilty. So, but one of the passive effects to your point is that people realize like, hey, nothing's being done about this. It's kind of weird, and it starts to raise questions by some of the people that are, you know, a little bit more open to thinking these difficult things. And I think that that's kind of one of the problems too, is that you have a lot of people, and I'm not trying to say this from like a snobby perspective, or I'm trying to say this in the most humble way possible. But you have a lot of people that just aren't thinkers. Like they just don't care to think about these big existential questions, or they don't care to try to spearhead these charges in the right direction. They're kind of more of somebody who they're going to link onto things and ride in the back seat. And like, yeah, you're still a passenger. You're still helping. But I think that it's important for people to kind of figure out where they're at with things. And if you're more of a follower, like that's 100% great. Like there's you're necessary, right? But you need to figure out where you're at, and then figure out the people that you can get behind and follow and let lead you. And you know, I think that one of the most important parts too of having these groups and stuff is that you have somebody who is able to within that group that is able to help guide spiritually.
Yeah, there needs to be. I,
Like a
I,
chaplain of sorts,
I mean,
in a way.
that's an interesting introduction. I think that's a good way of, and I'd want to think about that some more. I mean, it's just like, oh, there's a part of me that goes, absolutely. I've read about it. I've thought about it. I've seen myself as that position before. And then I would also want to think, oh, well, I'm a little bit hesitant for like community groups to be like building rank structures and who goes to
Oh,
who,
no,
right?
I wouldn't be for, like, rank structures and stuff, but,
Hmm.
there's you think of it in the way of, like, with the military, right? Like, even if there is a loose rank structure, once you start getting into these more specialized teams, like, there's a rank structure, but you kind of overlook it in a lot of ways, right? Like, there's still that understanding, like, "Hey, if this guy tells me to do something, it's probably for a good reason." Like, I respect him and not necessarily the rank, I'll do it, all that. But, you have the majority of guys that make up like a couple of ranks, and, the lines start to get blurred, but you still have those guys where you're like, "Hey, I have this question concerning this." And it could be something physical or non-physical. There's gonna be that guy that you're gonna go to ask because you're like, "Hey, this guy knows a lot about that." And
I think that's true. I
so
would agree with you there. Is
it's not
that
necessarily like a rank structure thing because I don't I don't believe in that in like a community, like civilian kind of
Mhm.
approach to teams like that. I think that a rank structure is kind of going overboard. But yeah, there should be somebody that can be looked to for spiritual guidance, and not from like a definitive authoritative standpoint, but just as a, hey, this guy's really knowledgeable on this, and he can help us maintain our morality. Like you have chaplains in the military for a reason. Like they not only just provide that religious support, but they also act as, you know, psychiatrists or psychologists, whichever one.
As
Um,
a as a mentor in a time of difficulty. Yeah.
exactly. And so there should be somebody that you have that's in really good physical shape that can help coach everybody on their physical fitness. You should have somebody that has that spiritual side down that can help coach guys in that. Like the 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 thing that I see a lot of guys getting too wrapped up in, and it's one of those things where, to wrap it back, or to come back kind of to that Kierkegaard thing, is that you can get lost in the infinite. Like, you were saying earlier, like, you have lock picking that you want to do, the whole like realm of covert entry, and then you have forced entry, and then you have raids and CQB, and then you have the fieldcraft side, and then you have long range shooting, and you have food procurement, water collection, and homesteading, and then on top of that, you're telling me that I have to go to work, and I have a family that I need to provide for. Like, there's no way to be able to do all this stuff. So it comes down to, what are the capabilities of the group, not the individual. And
Mm.
you have guys that are really good in different things, and they have their niche that they fill their role on, and you do some cross training here and there to help get guys a little bit familiar with the baseline of things. Like, I'm not a medical dude at all, but I've sat in on some medical courses that, like, our corpsmen have given, and I've taken something small away from it. Like, that guy is still the resident medical expert, and I am not. But there's a couple things I've been able to take away from it that can help me out, and so I think that it's important that people realize that too.
Yeah, it's I heard there's like a funny story attached to it, and it's there was a guy, because we've all heard like the alpha beta sigma male kind of, like the memosphere of that one.
Yeah,
And where I think where that does something good is it like it where it does good when it helps describe certain social dynamics.
it's like archetypes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think there, but where I have an issue with it, and where I think I go wrong, or I think it goes wrong, is it when it strays from the descriptive to the prescriptive. Like, well, you're a beta, so you do this, or you're a sigma,
I see what
so
you're
you
saying.
do this, or oh well, I'm and you see it like I think you see it more often on the internalized side, where somebody goes, well, like, I'm an alpha, this is just what I do, and you're like,
Hmm.
no.
They use it to overlook their downfalls.
Yeah, but there was a guy, which is this is I mean this is going to be it's probably the best worst story of it, but there was a guy who wrote a book, and he was
Oh,
talking about.
those are the worst kind of guys.
I know, right? Oh, I should, like, everyone who's ever written a book is a bad person. But this guy, like, he's kind of a tragedy case in on the one hand, but he's also much worse than that. And I'm just gonna get to the ending. I have to burn through it real quickly. So there was a guy, he wrote a book called Sanction, and then he actually wrote three of them. And he was this kind of wild man character, and he was arguing at one. I was listening to him talk at one point in time, and he was arguing about how some people are alphas, they're like leaders, and then some people are like betas, they're like followers, and this is where people get obsessed with like the chimpanzee thing.
Mm.
And then he was super into that, and he goes, but some people are like sigmas, they're not, they realize they're not going to be alphas, they're not the leaders, but they're like the spiritual guide, they're like the witch doctor or the priest or whatever. And this guy like identified as that, and he turned it from a descriptive to a prescriptive thing. And then he wrote this book that was it was this very ethically difficult book to read. um and then he went on and like murdered a bunch of people. So,
Mm.
and then he
Mm.
got killed by a police officer. And it's like, and to for a while, a lot of for a while it was like, oh, this guy's interesting, he's like making these interesting observations at this time. But then he went on to go basically betray his position by going off on this ridiculous, on this, not ridiculous, but this just like this murder spree, which from my perspective looks nothing more than petty vengeance. Like, he was angry at these people who he thought, and I'm not going to get into the legality of who did what and whether he was justified or not, on not even justified, but it's like on whether or not he was actually screwed over or not, or they were competition. None of this stuff matters. What matters is that he was talking about the difficulty, like he was talking about and writing in this very like thorough, I wouldn't say it's compelling, but intriguing way. And it was like, oh wow, this guy really is going hard in the paint on trying to understand this stuff and trying to like engage with it and wrestle with it difficultly. And the nice thing about his books is that they weren't written softly. But then he went out and did this murder thing.
And devalued everything.
And it's just kind of like, I don't know if I can take your writing seriously anymore, because it's not a poetic justice. It was like they screwed me over, so I went and tried to kill them. And then he died in the most, like, according to his worldview, in the most pathetic way. And there were, and then it opened up this massive avenue of attack for a lot of people who had spoken to him, who he had spoken with, and this is sort of in the manosphere arena and different other arenas. But he had spoken to these people, and then he went off and did this thing, and like everyone had to deal with the consequences of it, and because it was like, no, this was bad. You were a bad person. You are not a good representation of what you were talking about. In fact, you are the breakdown of your worldview. And if you want to call it tragic, the tragedy of it was that whether you call him a charlatan or a misogynist or whatever, it was like, think of putting in all this time and effort and energy into writing, struggling with these difficult ideas and these issues of the West and all these other challenges, and then going off and essentially becoming the meme. It's like, no, the world did not turn you into a joke. You turned yourself into a joke.
Yeah.
And it serves as like a warning to this day of this, I brought this up because like the whole alpha beta sigma thing is entertaining, but I think it's run its course, and I don't and when people make it their worldview, it's cringy. Not only is it cringy, but it's just like, it's so shallow.
Well, it's
I've
one of
met,
those things too, where that's where the whole like thing that ended up turning into another meme sprouted from. That's like, go touch grass. Like when people
Mhm.
have these ideas that are just, they focused on these ideas and they've spent so much time behind a screen, or even head buried in some books that are super hyper fixated on these ideas, and they get these like wild viewpoints and stuff, and it's like, dude, just go outside. Like everything will clear up.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like that guy was participant in these different conversations, um, but I don't think he had a community. Like I don't think he had anybody. I think his if he had a community, I don't think they would have been a part of it. And
Well, he was probably so autistic that anyone that tried to, like, get with him was like, "I can't do this." Like, "This guy
yeah,
is off the goop. I cannot follow this guy."
I had a few brief conversations with him over text messages, and it was like, we never actually talked. But
Yeah.
it was like, when I found out about this, I won't go so far as to say I was heartbroken, but I was like, wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because now, like now it's like, and he didn't write a small book. It's like, I invested all this time to read this book and kind of wrestle with the ideas, and now it's like, well, at least I have one, because they'll never be sold again, I guess.
Yeah.
Investment strategy 0. So, but in that case, it's just, it's sort of it's a neither here nor there.
Well, it's one of those things too where, there's a lot of, you can even see this on a real small scale in the internet gun world, is where you have a lot of these people that are preaching certain things, but they're so far removed from the things that they're preaching that it's like, not even, you shouldn't even be listening to them, right? Like you have these people that are trying to talk about preparedness for the average civilian and all that stuff, and they're getting like, crazy sponsorships and free, rifles that are $2,500 alone, and whatever accessories they want and all that stuff, and then they're going to try to preach like how the average person should prep for things, and it's like, I don't know if I can buy that.
Yeah, I'm gonna burst your bubble. Like, I've been in that position before where I've received stuff.
I've received
Uh,
stuff too.
like
It's not bad, but it's
there is a there like I it is an interesting place, because like I've been in a position before where people have trusted me with expensive items,
oh yeah.
and or and it's like, And yeah, right. So like if you get given an expense, how do I even approach this correctly? Um, it from the civilian, no, not the civilian, from like the one perspective, yeah, I can see that's a hard hurdle, right? So like let's take Garand Thumb generally has a good reputation in this industry as being a good person, like not just he generally has a good reputation, right? He's not all how do I put this way? As a guy who runs a podcast, who's been involved in gun culture, I look up to him in a sense of I think he does it well. And I think he presents a good platform to he has a good platform and what's the word I'm looking for? Participation message to the industry.
Yeah.
But Grand Thumb certainly has received, and he is not strapped for cash,
Oh
right?
no.
Right. Another example of it would be maybe like you could even go so far as to say somebody like Elon Musk, right? Or Tim Pool has. This has certainly been a challenge that's gone to someone like Tim Pool before, and the issue is that when you say certain things, like I think it was Marcus Singletary who brought this up really, really well, and he's over at Cloaked Entry Co. On Instagram, he's Sky Pirate Actual.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
I know.
And he brought up this point. He's like, during the brace ruling thing, as that was carrying out, he made a commentary. He made a point that was like, he finds it hard. He finds it not only hard but disingenuous for somebody who's got who's spent all of the time, correct? Like someone like Lucas Botkin, who has built a business and has an SOT, and Lucas has some very expensive guns, right? And he has this business, and whether or not you consider it legitimate or not is really beyond the point at this position. But if somebody like Lucas Botkin were to come out and say, um, consequences be damned, just put a stock on it, right? um in the height of the brace ruling fervor, it doesn't mean the same thing to somebody in his position.
No, no, I
No.
agree, and that was something that me and Gio on this podcast had brought up, and we talked to Sky Pirate, and then there's another guy that goes around these circles. I know, and he was on an episode. His name is Shopping Cart Authoritarian because he actually wrote that like 4chan post about like the shopping cart theory, where like
Oh,
people be self-governing because they don't return the shopping cart.
is he the originator of that idea?
Yeah, yeah, he's the one that wrote it.
No way.
Yeah, but we did an episode just kinda talking about it and, like, the legal ramifications to things, and the thing that he had brought up that was a really good point is, like, where's the funding gonna go for, or where's the funding coming from to pay legal fees for these people that are going to go, en masse and defy the ruling? Like, you can shout noncompliance all the time, but if you're loud enough, you're gonna be heard, and we know what happens to people that are loud enough with their defiance and are heard, and they do it in a way that's not, you know, the best or that can come off as violent or whatever, right? Like,
They're
they
loud
get
enough.
they get no knocked.
Or yeah, they get no. I mean, it's a very simple. It's a tactical position. They make themselves an easy target. They're
Yeah,
loud.
exactly.
Everyone knows who they are. They're defiant, and they don't have a strong defense. And that
No,
doesn't mean like their house is a castle. I mean, they don't have the resources at bay
they don't
to.
have the legal defense to keep them out of jail, and, we kept bringing up the point that if you're going to be the prepared guy and you're gonna be the guy that, you know, is ready for these things, you should ultimately be somebody that has a lot to lose because you're going to be more calculated in how you do things. And the guys that are not going out of their way to post something for internet points and are defying it are essentially making that real ruling less and less useful. But they're doing it in a way that's not coming out and saying like, "Hey, look at me, I'm an easy target." And I think that the kind of crossroads that you come to are like, okay, on one hand, people need to be making it known that this is a thing to inspire other people, right? And I'm not necessarily talking about the brace ruling. I'm even talking about Christianity, for example, bringing into or becoming a part of the Second Amendment culture. Like you had said before, the Warrior Poet Society, he was a little hesitant before to talk about it because it wasn't really trendy. But once you get a couple of guys that are out there, then more and more start coming out of the woodwork and say, "Hey, I'm cool with this." But to kind of circle back, like, yeah, okay, you have people that have these SOTs that are saying put a stock on it, and it's like maybe I shouldn't listen to you on this sense. And I don't think that receiving things for free is necessarily bad because I have too, from other companies, but it's one of those things where it's your approach on it. And you have somebody like Grantham who he might say, "Hey, I received this product to test it and it sucked. Like the hype is not worth it." And that's, one way to do it. And then you have the people that get these things and they're like, "Hey, this is what you need to use to be prepared." And it's like, I don't know if I'm going to buy that. But there's a lot of
Yeah.
younger guys that are impressionable and they don't know because they don't have the real world experience, right? Like you or I might be able to look at something and say, "Oh, I don't think that I buy that. I need that because I've done field ops or I've gone and done deployments and stuff like that. And I didn't have that and I'm still here." So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Snake
I
oil
think
salesman, right?
I think we're talking about a subject that hasn't been. We're talking about a subject that is on the forefront of many conversations that happen within gun culture, and that is the
Mhm.
relationship we have between each other. And I, as a person who has received a fair share of stuff from companies and worked with them in exchange for this for that or whatever, yeah, like I recognize that I am a little different. Um, that for me to go out and say certain things is can come across as disingenuous. However, what I actually think is happening in culture is we're moving away from the "you have to have this" mentality. Like that's really introductory level stuff. The level of conversation where it's like, well, you're not prepared if you don't have a bolt action that can shoot out to 1,000 yards and an AR-15 with night vision capabilities, and then two different backup handguns. It's like we're not. I don't really think that's a mature that's not where mature conversations are having on what everything you have to be considered prepared. Because that goes back to what we were talking about earlier at the beginning of this podcast with you have what we were calling kind of the hobbyist and the enthusiast, or the hobbyist and the prepper, is that once you step into the prepper world, the first thing that you get introduced to you had in the past was, well, you if you don't have this packing list, you're not prepared. You don't you don't have 25 years of food for everybody in your household, you're not prepared. And it's
Yeah.
like, I didn't come here to be lectured on what preparedness looks like. I came here to find a community to spend time with each other. And that attitude has won. I will reinforce this. I am anti-nihilist in this perspective. We have won. And it is that there you will find people who will argue this versus that for clout, and sometimes people who don't do that will engage in it and they'll have to ask for forgiveness.
Hmm.
But it really doesn't define the culture. That is an old way of thinking. It's not who we are. And if you know anyone in the industry, you're gonna feel it right away.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too that stuff is an inevitable thing that you need to have to be prepared, right? Like you need to have certain things. There are things that you need to go out and buy to get. And that's, as far as as little as going to your local hardware store and buying a spade so you can plant a couple of vegetable plants, to having night vision and thermal and counter thermal capabilities and all that stuff. Like there's such a wide range of stuff that you should have. And, I think that the importance of one thing versus the other is heavily debated on in many ways. I think that so there right now there's a series that I'm working on. It's going to become like a video series in the winter probably, and there's a handful of people that are helping to sponsor it and all that stuff. But essentially, what I'm trying to do is do parts on like a fully equipped series to go from absolutely nothing to having everything that you would need on the baseline as far as like the tactical side goes. Um, Now, obviously, that's not going to get into the skill set and how to use it properly and all that stuff, because I think that the problem with that is like there's too many variables and too many different things to accurately do that, right? Like I can give examples of what I'm going to pack on a patrol, but then you're going to have all these people that are like, "Oh, that doesn't apply to me because I live in a desert." And it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to need some things that I don't have, and vice versa. But I think that one of the big things that people need to do, and that I'm trying to do, and I'd like to see more of it, and I think I do see more of it, to your point too, is guys are pushing back a little bit on the hype. You have a lot of guys that are pushing and saying, "Hey, you need this, or else you're not ready. You need this, or else you're not ready." Um, and I caught some flack, probably like a year ago, a little less, because I was saying that you to be to be considered a serious threat or a serious combatant, you should probably have night vision, and that rustled a lot of feathers. But you think of it in the sense of your own arms race, right? Like everybody who's trying to prepare for this, there's the gear and the gun side of things, and it's an arms race, and you need to be at the forefront of it. Now, where it kind of circles back and why I'm kind of doing a series on it is because I think that a lot of people get caught up in buying multiple guns that do the same thing, or multiple guns that do uh, these like weird theoretical things that aren't going to be necessary, right? Like I don't personally need a PRS style build, like a precision rifle build, because the most I've ever shot out to is like 500 yards, because the Marine Corps makes me. Like in practice, I generally don't shoot past 300. So why should I fall into the hype of PRS if that becomes a trend, when it's not applicable to me? And I think it's important for guys to understand the why behind the what, and know what they're getting and all that. And it was actually a graphic that T-Rex Arms had made a little while ago, where it had like all these different guns, and it was saying that it was like, 10 grand or whatever, and then it had like a quality rifle and some quality kit and a helmet with some night vision. It was saying that that was like 10 grand too. So it was basically saying that it's the um, same value. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of why what I'm approaching, and why I'm trying to do it, is to help guys understand, like, okay, this is not something that you should fall for the hype for. Here's a budget option. Here's a more expensive option that you can get. Here are the pros versus cons of getting this versus that and all that. So that way you can get fully equipped. So that way guys can just stop worrying about it and then start focusing on the more important things, like your faith and like your long-term preparedness for food and water and all that stuff.
I admire your project, partially because I've thought of doing something similar, but you might beat me to it.
I don't
So
know. I'm doing a lot right
I
now because I'm on paternity leave, so I like don't have to
yeah.
go to work. But I know as soon as I go to work, I'm gonna start stalling hard.
Yeah, fair. So the way that I was looking at the same problem was, okay, so let's get as many people across the industry who are maybe like of mixed levels of mixed places, right? So
Mhm.
I want to take some CAG dudes, and I want to take some SEAL team guys, and I want to take some Ranger guys, and I want to take some civilian guys, and I want to take some Marine Corps Raiders and recce pros, and pull it, and like all these people together, right? And then ask them the same question of like, what does a complete loadout look like to you if you could have your dream setup of everything, right? And so that would be if you had a locker that was of infinite, you had a video game backpack which never runs out of space, and you could fill that backpack with everything that you would ever want for a series of different types of mission sets, one of them being like a night raid, one of them being a area defense, one of them being a reconnaissance, one of them being a surreptitious, and one of them being like all of these different things. And if you could fill that with everything that you could, what would that look like? And then take all of the things that are the same across the board, and then show this is what, like, everyone had an AR-15 with 7 magazines. Okay, or at least 7 magazines, right? So
Mhm.
let's just say that as an example. And then point out where there are variations, and make it anonymous. So if Lucas Bodkin, Mike Jones, Blake from Blake from who works with Orion Training Group,
Yep.
have these guys, and have someone like you, someone like myself, someone like Mojave Repeater, somebody and all people from all across the culture and the industry, uh, maybe even like Mike Glover, and keep going down that road, right? And get like 20 people's loadouts, and then just look at what's common across all of them, and you're going to see what most people are looking for. You want a reliable tool with magazines, you want a rucksack, you want a plate carrier, you want some sort of, almost everyone's going to say night vision. Okay, so now things like, what's standard or what's common across population, and
Hmm.
then you can look at what's uncommon, and instead of making it, well, this guy has a great idea because he put in a flipper zero, um but then take this guy who put in like an A10 helicopter or an A10 Warthog. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
I know that's a joke, but it's just like to kind of look at all of those things and not try to create a standard, but look at what these different personalities, without their names attached to them, have looked at what it does, and what these different backgrounds and what these different approaches has, because then you can see that. I know even a joke, but like, we're more together than we are apart in this sense, and really look at it that way as, well, I mean, these things are good things to look at. Like, look at your holes, and get your house together, and look at some of the things. And but where I differ from you is that I think the spiritual and the mental and the community come first, and those things help us inform on the second, and that's the kit and the gear and the loadouts.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot too. I think that doing something like that would be pretty fun as like more of like a blog series, because like right now for this, I'm calling it like a fully equipped series. I'm putting out I put out like a pyramid of where I think you should start and continue to go. Um, and then I'm doing that in parts on like long form posts on my Patreon, and then it's going to turn into a video series this winter that I'm going to basically cover the same stuff, not necessarily as in depth, or just as in depth depending on what it is. But I think that the
I'm not
gun
going
would,
for. I'm not really going for like an in depth. I'm going for a broad. Like, what does
yeah.
it look? What does it look like across this whole spectrum?
No, no, that's fair. Big picture going in. I like to the way that I like to do things is I like to have something and then kind of break down pros and cons of it. I
Mhm.
think that having the big picture thing is really beneficial in a lot of ways. But your last part, I would say that the your I think that the spiritual and then the material side complement each other, because you have the motivation to equip yourself.
Mhm.
And that's when it starts. Like I personally don't think that you should get fully equipped and then be like, okay, why did I do this? So I kind of go in the understanding that or the assumption, I guess, that people have that motivation and that reason, and now they're looking to get equipped and they want to waste as little money as possible. But
Fair.
I think too that it's important that we challenge our own ideas. And I think that the constant, like, because I'm in a lot of different groups online that buy and sell gear, and there's a lot of guys that flip all the time, and they're constantly like theory crafting and changing setups and all that stuff, and it's I like to tinker too. I'm guilty of it a lot, but I think that there's a lot of guys that do it to keep their minds occupied. Um, and I think that that can be useful, and that can be dangerous, depending on how at capacity you are, when it stops
Yeah.
you to look at these bigger picture things.
You have to ask yourself the question: if you could have all the kit and training that you wanted, who would you be?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think that's. I think it's a good way to end it, and I think it's a
Yeah.
good way to conclude for the night. So, is there anything that you want to leave us with, and then include that with, how do we find you? How do we keep up with your work?
Um, no, I would say that don't be afraid to jump into the spiritual, kind of thing. I think that a lot of people are gonna I think that if you jump into it, don't fall for what may be the most, appetizing thing. If you're trying to escape this world and the issues that come with it, you should look at some things that do not play along nicely with it. So I'll leave it with that. But as far as how to find me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and whatnot. And I generally just go by the Longhouse Preparedness. So
Cool. So Instagram and Twitter, Twitter, the Longhouse Preparedness.
yep.
I know I follow you on Twitter. If I haven't hit you up on Instagram, I thought we connected, but I'll do that as well.
Yeah, I end up
And
following you. And also too, I have a podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple, and it's called the Longhouse Preparedness.
awesome. How often do you post?
Um, I don't have like a regimented schedule. Right
Okay,
now it's posted less. Sometimes it's posted more. I try to do generally when I'm in my groove, I try to post one a week.
good.
But I think the last one that we posted was maybe like a month ago.
All right, cool. Well, it's always there. I mean, there is hunger and people are looking. So I'm glad to see that I'm not alone in this arena. And I'm glad to have you on, man. Thanks for joining the show. Tyler, it's been a pleasure. I think this conversation has been good for both my edification. I hope those who are listening have gained something out of it too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I really appreciate you letting me come on and ramble for a couple hours. So it's been good.
well, if nothing else, the conversations that we have with one another, one thing that does continue to inspire me is that, you know, like we have conversations like what you and I are having right now, and then, but when I leave my little ivory tower of academia, and I go and look at kind of how people within gun culture are interacting with each other, they're having these same kind of conversations. Sure enough, you know, we friends will talk about gear and kit, and we'll talk about training, and we'll talk about all these other kind of stuff. But I do believe that this is really what we're doing here is not abnormal in gun culture. I think it's something that's it's a part of what we're doing here, and so I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad to be here where I'm at, and so I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to sit on a 2.5 hour conversation with you, even though we haven't met in person, and find out that we do have similarities and we have things that we want to believe on, and we're able to have conversations about the hard things that sometimes cut down deep. And so, thank you very much for taking your time. But yeah, I'll close out then. And before we go, we'll just kind of wrap up at the end here. But
Yeah, yeah, awesome.
awesome. Well, then, for those who are still listening, you know where to find us. This has been the Redacted Culture Cast. Our focus here has been to engage in the life of the mind with a particular interest in gun culture, Americana, and what we think to be right and true and good. Today's conversation with Tyler was focused on quite a bit of faith, and not only just faith itself, but we got into some theology. And I thank you for your time that you've spent with us. If you want to support the channel, you can head over to redactedculture.locals.com. That is where you can support us, because instead of doing a Patreon, we're doing locals. And that's where you can support the show, keep the show rolling, and keep the content rolling out. And as we continue to expand on to bigger and better things, that's going to be the way that we get there. And so I thank you for the support that you've given us so far. We also do run a shop, which at the time of publishing this is going to be closed, but we're opening up again soon with some new things coming out. And I have some announcements to be making in the near future on some things that I have not seen done before. So I hope that you'll stay tuned. But of all things that we are here for, we are focused on what is right and true and good, so we can build strong communities, a decentralized environment where we can look to one another and have faith in God and be able to work with each other. And so I got to thank you for listening to us. If you want to support, you can go ahead. Other than that, we're going to close off with how we do: go forth and conquer.